Jesus and his friends enjoyed being close to home. He didn't always get a great reception at the home congregation, but it was familiar. Home is familiar in so many different ways. I mean, home looks familiar. You're around people that are like you, that kind of say the things you expect them to say and do the things, even cook the meals that you expect to have cooked with the same smells and everything. And you know the roads, you know where everything goes, and you know how to get there. But Jesus never stayed in one place, and he kept traveling, and the disciples kind of went with him. They didn't always know where they were going to end up. They kind of knew the territory from Nazareth and Galilee and down to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and back, and about the size of the state of Vermont. And they did that, but this one day, he went off in another direction. And they traveled north around the Sea of Galilee, which is gorgeous territory. It even can snow there at the top of the mountains north of Galilee. And there's pine forest, and it's beautiful. It's not the rocky, dusty desert that we all think of as Bible lands. And they went off on a hike in the woods. And this sounds fun. And so they're going off because they know Jesus likes to go to lonely places to pray. And they kept following him. But he kept going farther. And they knew that like home was getting farther away. And they were seeing less and less people that looked like them or that talked like them. And more people with different accents, skin color, and kind of their noses were a little bit different. And they started to see Romans and soldiers, and worse off, of course, they found pig farmers, which to them was really a bad idea. And they came through the cities on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and they got all the way to the city of the Gerasenes, and it was filled with different smells and different foods, right? Because there was like bacon and there was pork, and it was just a whole different celebration and a different accent. And the disciples were kind of sticking closer and closer to Jesus because they're like, I don't know. We follow you anywhere, Lord, but this is getting a little dicey, and I'm not sure we're really ready for this. And then they get through the city, and where does Jesus end up? In the cemetery. It's like, whoa, you have gone, this is crazy. Why are we here? Because like, we're now unclean. This is unclean territory. This is around dead things and bodies and decay, and it's out on the outskirts. And why on earth are we here among the tombs? And then they see a man running through the cemetery, alive. And I can't help but think that Luke kind of gives us an echo ahead of time. For when an angel will say, why are you looking for the living among the dead? To the women on that Easter Sunday morning. And here's Jesus bringing the disciples into the cemetery, and they find a live person. But Luke describes this person. He's naked. He's bruised. He's shackled. He's running around, thriving and screaming. And what is the matter with him? And why is he outside of town in the cemetery living? Who would go there? Who would be sent there? Who would be kept there? And I wonder who this person was. The gospel, unfortunately or fortunately, does not tell us much about him, except that he's described as demon-possessed, out of his mind. Why would you be there? Why would you be living on the outskirts of town and society with no one else around? Why would you be living, huddling, finding shelter next to a tombstone, next to memories of old things that are gone and decayed and shunned and forgotten, far away from the rest of human society and comfortability and respectability? In fact, was he sent there by the rest of the town because they didn't know what to do with him? Because he would go off and start yelling and screaming about things they didn't understand? Was he, in today's terms, schizophrenic or paranoid? I wonder, was he a Roman soldier that had been to the front and had seen horrid things that no human being should ever see, what human beings do to one another, and he just lost it? and couldn't stand to be in comfortable society anymore. So that's where he lived. Did he have an injury or an illness and they didn't know what to do with him? So the easiest thing to do is lock him up and keep him away, forget about him. Had he suffered such intense grief and pain and suffering that just other people bothered him? Was he agoraphobic in our own language today, that just being around other people became a bit too much? Was it that the city in which he had lived and the neighborhood and the family, he was a lone ranger and they just had had enough of trying to figure out what to do with him, and they just kept kicking him out and kicking him out. I don't know what mentally, physically, and emotionally chained this person and kept him out of society, writhing and thriving. But somehow when Jesus and the disciples got there, whatever Jesus said brought him down. Can you still get it? Whatever Jesus said calmed him. Whatever Jesus said acknowledged him as a human being and a person with great need and a great life to be lived, a person with hopes and dreams, a child of God, a descendant of Abraham and Sarah, heirs of the promise that the world would be blessed through a relationship with God and through him. Something calmed the man down. At the end of the story, Luke tells us he was clothed and in his right mind. Oh, here's the kicker. Everybody in town came out to see what was happening, and they saw the man clothed and in his right mind, and they said, "Get out of here. Jesus, you and the guy go away. We can't handle this." We knew what he was when he was crazy. We knew what he was when he was writhing and naked and screaming. We didn't like that either, but now this. He can't come back. We don't know what to do with him. We can't deal with him. So the man said, "Jesus, please, let me go with you and these good guys, and I'll go back on the other side of the lake and into your culture, which I don't understand. I'll stop eating pork and sausages and bacon, and we'll go your way. And I don't really speak the language or anything, but you, I get your language, and I'll go with you." And Jesus said, "No. You need to go back, and you need to go let them see and hear and feel the transformation that has happened in your life and what God has done, and that you're okay, and that you're welcome, and that you're accepted, and you're part of community, and you have something to give them. You have something to share with them. You have something to offer them as blessing, and you need to be part of everything. You are the gospel that they need to hear, not from me," Jesus said. They need to hear it from you and what has now happened to your life. And the message that you were screaming at them, that they also need to hear in a voice and a language and a time that they can understand. The powerful story of the gospel of the Gadarene demoniac, as he is often called, is a powerful story for you and me on the day that we celebrate freedom, on the day that we celebrate the right for African American and formerly enslaved people to participate fully in our republic and our democracy and to vote. Now, I remember being very frustrated as a teenager at 17 in 1976, which was a wonderful bicentennial. All right, do the math. Just turned 63 last week. Anyway, it was a presidential election year and I couldn't vote. I was so upset. And we were all in the throngs of patriotism and everything, and I wanted to exercise my franchise. But I tell you, I have voted in every election, off year, on year, local, school, primary, the whole thing, since I turned 18. Here in the state of New York, in the state of Illinois, in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. And every time I go, I'm never asked much of a thing except my name. Let me ask you all, do you have to present your voter ID when you vote? Do you have to present your driver's license? Do you have to say anything except, yeah, that's my signature? They turn the book around, or now it's an electronic thing and it doesn't even look like any signature at all, but good heavens. Right. So it's always astounded me that there's this hullabaloo and fuss over giving more and more and more and more requirements for people to prove that they're citizens and they get to vote in this great land of ours. When I've just waltzed right in, signed my name, and voted. Forgive this phrase, the same little old lady that's always been sitting there has been sitting there, God bless her. But here, I've moved around. No one in Illinois knew who I was. But I walked in with tall, white power and privilege and just voted. I have no idea what it's like to have that ripped away. I was so annoyed at 17 that I couldn't do it. Because I was aware of what was going on. I was a high school student. We were into all these things. It was the end of the 60s. It was the beginning of the 70s. We knew what was happening in the world and wanted to participate. So I cannot imagine what it is like to be turned away and shunned because of 1,000 different and no real reasons. The radicalness of the Christian gospel and why Christians were persecuted, tortured, and killed in the first century was because they believed that everybody belonged. That upset Roman society. That upset religious society. This understanding that in the very history of the scriptures themselves, way back to Abraham, the progenitor of the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faith, that the whole world was part of God's covenant, that all races and relations were to be blessed by people's relationship with God. And it was to transform. The challenge is, as neat as that appears, as important and as kind of kumbaya loving as that is, unless the transformation happens first inside each person, it's really hard to do it to other folks. Because sometimes I think we are locked in our own prisons of judgment and critique for not measuring up. Sometimes we're locked in our own prisons of not being everything we think we should be or what we think everybody else thinks we should be, and we limit ourselves into unacceptability, and so it's really hard when someone else succeeds or triumphs that we think that's okay. Because we live in the bizarre understanding that blessing is a pie. And there's only so many pieces. And if I give a piece of my pie to you, I now have less of a pie for me. God's grace and even our economy, even our finances actually doesn't work that way. Because there's no gold, well, there is gold in Fort Knox, but that's not how we get our dollars. Many people are frustrated by that, but that means that we can keep making more money. You can do more things, be more creative. Everyone actually can succeed. It's not just because I succeed, you cannot succeed. It's that way economically, financially. It's that way by God's grace. There is not a limit on who can be happy and who can thrive and who can be loved and who can be welcomed and who can be accepted. It's all right if you have a wonderful life. That actually doesn't diminish mine. In fact, it enhances it. Because I don't know about you, but I like to be around people that are actually happy and having a good time. People that are down and criticizing and moaning and find nothing but what is wrong in the world really wear me out. But people that have found joy in their own heart and life buoy me up. People that have found a relationship with God that transforms them not into guilt-ridden, downtrodden people, but in people of hope and purpose that actually want to do something with their lives at any age and any stage. Empower me, excite me. Do I get envious? Of course, over some things somebody has that I don't happen to have, but I realize that together we do rise, and it does make a difference in Christ's family. The beloved community that we're talking about happens by an inner transformation that begins with our relationship with God and our relationship with ourselves, our inner selves. And when that transformation happens, like the man in the cemetery in the Gentile territory, then the relationships with other people can transform. Then we can actually go out and care about people who are vastly different than ourselves and stand up for them and stand up with them and make a difference and speak for them if no one's listening to them, or quiet everybody else so they can speak. If health is our goal, spiritual, mental, and physical health, it starts with getting rid of the agita of our own hearts and our own minds by clearing things away. So Paul said it to the Galatians that if you're in a relationship with God, if you're in a relationship with Christ, it changes you and it changes your relationship with everybody else. So the question is, where's your relationship with God? Are you waiting for God to ridicule, chain, and send you out? Or are you thankful that God is welcoming, sitting down, and understanding you? And you want to continue to understand God. So that whatever it is, whether it's getting older, with the limitations that come on that, whether it's youth, whether it's your own identity you're not sure of, whether it's your mind that seems to be forgetting things as things go on, whether it's health in the body that starts to fall apart, whether it's economics, whether it's mental illness, whether it's the color of your skin, the orientation of your sexuality, and you kind of question everything. Do you know that with all of that multifacetedness of who you are right now today, that God sits down and listens and knows you and gives you the power to do that for other people? John Wesley, the English reformer that gave birth to the Methodist societies, preached about personal piety and social holiness. Today we call that social justice. The problem is when he preached that, he got kicked out of every church in England and lost his pulpit time after time after time. So in the end, he had no place he could preach, and he owned no property except his father's grave. So he went to the cemetery, to his father's grave, stood on the tombstone, and started preaching to the coal miners, to the laborers, to the widows, to everybody that had not been allowed in the fine pews of the Church of England, and the throngs came to listen to him on the only place he could speak. Sometimes the only place we can speak is the place where people are in most desperate need, when people are dying. And maybe it's that cemetery, that one spot. Maybe it's the homeless on the street. Maybe it's going to a Juneteenth celebration and celebrating with people of color and other people that they are valued. Maybe it's standing up with LGBTQAI people on Pride Wednesday with us. And know that none of it comes without risks. Society didn't like what John was doing. They didn't like what Jesus was doing. They didn't like what the first century Christians were doing. They will not like that you want to value everybody. But it's the only way transformation happens. It's happened in your heart and your life and in your recovery and in your strengthening, and now it's a gift you offer to others. For in Christ, in God, there are multifaceted realities, but there is no difference of judgment. There is no difference of worth. There is no difference of value. But there is a multifaceted sea and mosaic of who God is in the world. And we don't want to miss a single part of it. We are called to resist evil in whatever form it presents itself, to speak up, to witness, and we do that from a place of spiritual strength. I pray that you know you are connected to God, who continues to pursue you and empower you through all of the strength and the challenges that you face and that the world faces, to be a light. We resist, we stand up, we transform the world. Thanks be to God. Amen.